And then we'll get going. Lovely. Okay, I'll keep an eye if we're going to have any more people coming in. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this innovation workshop with UCLB for our Genesis 2020 Digital Conference. The topic today is attracting digital skills to the life sciences. Just a couple of housekeeping points before we get going. All of you at the moment have got your mics and cameras off. If we can keep them off, that would be great. Any questions, please just pop them in the chat box and we'll try and pick them up as we go through. And I think that is it. So I'm going to hand you over to Geraint, who will introduce you to himself, and then he'll hand it over to the other panel members so that they can introduce themselves too. So over to you, Geraint.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to say a quick welcome to what I hope is going to be almost an hour of very interesting discussion for me, I'm certain, on what I think is one of the most pressing topics across the knowledge-dependent industry sectors. There's a clear intersection between the huge horsepower of our talent-supplying schools and universities and the huge and sustained need of our tech industries for talented, appropriately skilled and agile people. We want to air the issues and ideally get to the bottom of some of them. And today we have a really excellent panel of highly diverse in its experience panel with, I'm certain, and going to be interesting perspectives and plenty of highly relevant experience to back it up. So with that in mind, panel, if I could ask you to introduce yourselves, starting in alphabetical order. Beth.
Oh, fantastic. I'm Beth. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Manchester in astrophysics. I focus largely on processing of large samples of sources, as well as huge data sets from telescope facilities across the world. Marvelous.
And Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jackie Hunter. I'm a board director at BenevolentAI. I also chair the board of a company, Brainomics, that uses AI to essentially drive new automated imaging approaches for stroke and other disorders. And I've basically had a background in the pharmaceutical industry, but more latterly have been fascinated by the power of and impact that AI can have on healthcare and drug discovery.
Marvelous, thank you, Jackie. Krzysztof?
My name is Krzysztof Potempa. I'm the founder and CEO of Braincures. My background is essentially from about 15 years in both academia and pharma before deciding to be a bio-entrepreneur in the data analytics space, which I was working in since 2000, you could say, 4.
Marvelous, thank you, Krzysztof. And Rowan.
So my name is Rowan Gardner, and I'm a founder of Precision Life, a company whose purpose is using novel population analytics to find better treatment for patients with unmet clinical need. And I'm a serial entrepreneur in the space, so I've been building teams at the interface of computing and life sciences for the last 30 years. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're having today.
Marvelous, thank you, Rowan. And I'm Geraint Thomas, and I'm a professor of biochemistry in the Department of Cell and Developmental Biology at UCL. And strangely, I also have a degree in mathematics and a long and abiding interest in digital skills development for life sciences researchers. So if I could just set the scene, what do we know? Well, in the UK over recent years, it appears to me that there's been an increase in demand for workers with digital skills. And this demand as digital skills has outstripped the demand in other sectors by at least tenfold, as far as I can tell. So there's a lot of demand for workers, but more so with digital skills. And it's now thought, as far as I can see from my research, to be persistent and a major risk to innovation and maximization of competitive potential and for business growth. In some years, it appears that 75% of job openings have requested digital skills, and that's for low, middle, and high skill roles. And in each of these different skill strata, there's a wage premium. and the wage premium is biggest in the high skills strata. And this is not a trend restricted to the tech sector by any stretch. It's everywhere. It's in law, it's in accountancy, it's in engineering, it's in government. Everybody's struggling. The Royal Society recently made it very clear that radical action is needed to address what they describe as a chronic digital skills and talent supply problem. And if the UK wishes to remain a leading data research nation and have businesses that profit from that, then something really does need to be done. Furthermore, that these skills will need to be established in the hands of our problem solvers, along with other key attributes, professional resilience, excellent communications, which is to say that it's going to be embedded all the way up to leadership level and not just at some tech strata. A conclusion that's also been reached by all those other professions, judging by their public statements about succession planning and their plans for growing their businesses. So this isn't just a life sciences innovation problem. So my first question really into the panel is that what is this digital skills dilemma really that we're facing in the life sciences innovation sector? Is there really a gap? I mean, is this true? We're assuming that it is. What does it look like? What is the nature of this dilemma? And I wondered if I could start first by turning to Jackie. You know, wide experience in industry, pharma industry, also the public sector, research organisations as well. Now an enterprise in this sector. What are your initial thoughts about the real situation?
This clearly is a dearth of people who have, across the whole spectrum of data analytics and digital. And as you said in your introduction, right, there is a real need, and these people are very highly sought after. I think one of the issues for life sciences, well, one of the positives about life sciences, and one can actually say in some ways it's been accelerated by COVID, is first of all that a lot of people are attracted, especially to healthcare and biomedicine, because they see the power of it to do good for humanity. And so we've had people who've joined Benevolent who could work in the financial sector or who have worked in the financial sector, or for companies like Google, but they want to do something that they feel is going to be a real benefit. So that's something that I think we can capitalize on. But as again you mentioned, these people are highly sought after and do command a price premium. And certainly from an academic standpoint, as well as a commercial one, it is, it's a very competitive market. And then the second, I would say, is one of the things that's taken a lot of time is trying to get the domain experts, the biomedical domain experts, and the data scientists really working together and speaking the same language. And the sorts of people who can bridge that, sort of product owners or translators, if you will, are in even more short supply. So they have some domain expertise and they have some understanding of what is required from a data science point of view. And they can act as the glue to help bring those two things together, but they are very rare.
Yes, I don't necessarily want to comment on that, but that's a story I'm hearing more so. Who does the hard work of bridging the gap? That does really seem to be an extra talent above the other skills. Thinking about those skills, what do we mean? Which skills, what depth does it differ from generalized sort of digital appetite and aptitude and agility? Krzysztof, did you have any sort of feeling about what it is specifically or generally?
Well, I think I really like Jackie's use of the word translators of, you could say, information. So people who really are able to listen to what the teams are saying, what the users need. And I think it's clear that there's a lack of these people. And I think So we know from DKA Global Analytics that the 100 top AI experts, 15% of those are in pharma, and 1/5 of the time they use is for business development. And but I think the problem is really that we have essentially we have a lot of well, to really solve problems, we need to understand what the question is, what the user needs, and then get like these teams, like Jackie mentioned, people from big finance coming into, say, the pharmaceutical space. They will just be learning what a gene is, what the alphabet of the biology is, and you can't really acquire all this knowledge in one. That's why they might be very, very good at crunching some of the data and maybe actually linking the business models to it. But then you need someone above it all who is able to create the conversation, open, not close the space for creativity. So I think in my career of deciding to be a bio-entrepreneur, I've been fortunate to work with people who didn't restrict what I would do with big data. So I'm a biochemist by training. I came into big data in 2004. In 2010, microarrays became extinct, and I was an expert in microarray data analysis, you could say. And then I struggled to find the right role for some time. And but the point is that I actually went through a group that was a data scientist role. So I was, after being in a company, I then went back to a postdoc cycle. And in this postdoc cycle in the AI group, I felt that the people there were very restricted. I had to make a case for using network biology, which was, to me, I sounded really weird. So I think we really need to people who create the conversations, creativity, curiosity.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on that real source of horsepower, which is diversity of experience and agility, and the willingness to combine those two and not be trapped, for example, by the local knowledge sort of universe and expectations about how we've always done things. That's twice then that this agility has come, and also these connectors, these translators. I'm going to come to Rowan in just a second and expand on that a bit more, but quickly wanted to ask Beth, looking, as a highly competent, digitally skilled person, looking at life sciences, was it apparently, do you see a barrier because you don't have the cells and molecules knowledge, like somebody, say, transferring in from finance? Do you feel that's a gap, or do you feel you could get in and get going? It's learnable, it's tractable, you can take that sort of stretch?
So in terms of skills and knowledge, I'm quite used to swapping into projects where I'm a technical expert, but not a science expert. This is something we do in the physical sciences quite often. I do a lot of chemical modeling with actually a team at UCL, which I have absolutely no background in. But my job is to understand that to a level where it's sufficient to do my job as a data analyst, not to say lead the project. So I've recently been looking for jobs. I'm in this stage. And yes, it is definitely a barrier not having that background in a life sciences degree. For a start, if you look at the job requirements, there's often lab experience. I'm not trained in a particular use of lab equipment. I'm trained to take a list of numbers, a list of data in some context, and get some sort of meaning out of that. So experience with specific lab settings or specific software aren't going to apply to people like me, but perhaps aren't so relevant. Yeah,
and so your instinct and my instinct would probably be that that's exclusionary, that it's straight away putting up some sort of, if not conscious barrier, some sort of subconscious barrier that's that may be preventing the translation. So Rowan, I mean, do you recognize those those 3 points?
I'm slightly amused by the conversation. So yes, I recognize it, but I think it's important to remember, when the European Bioinformatics Institute was established on the Wellcome Sanger Genome Institute, the first director of the EBI was Paolo Zanella, who'd run computing at CERN for several decades and given a chap called Tim Berners-Lee a computer, which he did something quite useful with. And I remember having conversations with those individuals at the time. And I think it's just important to remember that we are recruiting we're recruiting very smart people here, right? So the block for some of the particle physicists when they came to EBI was, Chris Jones put it beautifully. He said, the standard model of physics, is so well understood, it can be printed and held in a small pocket-sized book that we can wander around in our pockets. Where the barrier comes is not in the genes and the actual kind of operational information level of biology. It's in its fundamental complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to suggest, Beth, and I don't really know anything about your research, but somebody who is qualified in and researching high mass star formation in the galaxy, who has large population data sets that describe stars and strong analytical experience, is exactly the person who would live large and make a huge impact at Precision Life, because what we're working with is large population data sets of people and bringing novel analytics to understand the disease biology better. And it's your capacity to interact and find insight in that data that we want to benefit from. And so I think, part of the challenge here is we as a life science industry perhaps, need to not necessarily try and train all our data scientists to be biologists, but recognize how you partner up, which I think Jackie was talking about.
Yeah.
The biology and the data sciences to execute on what we need in business. The challenge, I think, comes in how we describe the opportunities that we have and the skills that we need in language that resonates with our target audience. It's a classic comms piece. And in writing those roles, describe the core capabilities rather than the detail. After all, what's this data science being used for? Why are we using analytics methodology? It's to find patterns and insights in the data, and the joy of working in these companies is to work with multi-skilled, hugely talented people to come together and have an impact. And that's really what we want to attract. We want to attract those like-minded people, I think, rather than people who know that DNA's got 4 bases in it.
I think you make a really good point, Rowan, and I think part of it is people who are searching for the people with those skills don't always know the places to go. Not only do they not articulate it in language that could be attractive, but also and resonate, but also, would Precision Life normally go to an astrophysics department? I don't know you, Rowan, it probably would, but I mean...
So one of so just a bit of kind of a sort of 30 years of recruiting. If I go back to the early 90s, we were I was in a company called Oxford Molecular. We were developing software codes for pharmaceutical drug discovery modeling. If I looked at the software engineers, they all had a background in particle physics or astrophysics. Beth, you're absolutely kind of in the pool of talent that I believe life sciences should be forming a connection with. And I'm really grateful if I know that and the rest of them don't, because, I'm that's a key secret I'm keeping to myself, because, we have an advantage there at Precision Life, that's one of the pools that we would fish in. But I think also it's important, Jackie, to recognize the digital skills have a broad range. So, if I look at Precision Life, what are the skills that we would be recruiting for? Well, data science, for our algorithm development, we want comp sci mathematicians. Geraint, there might be a second career for you. We want DevOps people to support the environment that we're operating in. We want bioinformaticians. We are not building our own data lake, so we don't necessarily need data curators, but if I go out into other businesses, I'd expect those roles. And so for each of those areas, there are different pools that you would go hunting in, you know, to find those skills. You know, you opened beautifully, Geraint, when you said this is a problem that is taxing many industries right now. You know, Microsoft, I think, came out in 2012 and said, you know, they had 40% of the skills that they needed, you know, which was one of the reasons behind them putting that department into Cambridge.
Yeah.
So, you know, not only are we competing across industries, but depending on our organizational scale, the type of investment we can make in attracting those skills into our businesses is very, you know, differently aligned. So
yes, I mean, it's so straight away that takes me to something Jackie mentioned, which is the attractive factor in what it is that we do. That this is about people's lives on the small personal scale, but also the huge public health scale. It goes across everything. It can touch everything from, you know, from not just pharmaceutical development, but agrochemical development. It involves itself everywhere. So it seems to me that straight away, you know, from Rowan and Jackie, this is really well understood on the business side of the fence. But it sounds to me, Beth, the message just isn't getting through, which is it's a comms problem, as we've already mentioned. And presumably, Krzysztof, you didn't feel that there was this demand trying to suck you into this sector, but clearly it is there. So if I could just check with Beth and Krzysztof whether that's how it looks from that end of the telescope.
So Beth, you can go first, and I'll.
All right. Definitely. I was going to say, Jackie's saying this is a pool we fish in. We're not aware of it. This is a huge factor in looking at where we end up as a sort of population of academics. It's been very recent. It's become apparent in COVID, as Jackie was saying, that a lot of us have started going, what are we doing and could we be useful? Going into industry for us is usually seen as selling out in a way, of doing something that makes money in a finance corporation. And this is a huge barrier to us wanting to even leave academia. Life sciences is a way that actually changes that. As Jackie said, there's the motivation that people want to do good, people want to do something useful. And that could be a huge drive, really, to get people from my sort of background into the field. It's just a case of awareness. We're aware of medical imaging, we're aware of particle medicine. We are not aware of opportunities in life sciences. There's quite a deficit at the moment for any other sort of jobs.
Yeah.
So from my angle, I applied to UCB after the postdoc period, and I was told essentially that I'd be doing just one technique to solve the pharmaceutical problems. And I said, well, thank you for clarifying to me that I need to start my own company. And I can say that we're small. We're hiring, but I've had already about at least 4 students who came through, and they were fantastic, each and every one better than the next. So there's a lot of very, very young talent for which we need to figure out, I think, really good programs of how we finance them, because at this moment, I think there's still the cycle of we abuse PhD students and postdocs in terms of salaries. And I think, yes, I think this is where I think the concept is probably going in that direction, is how do we, I guess, train talent, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jackie.
Yeah, can I comment? I wonder, and this is perhaps throwing it back to you, Grant. Do you think that actually universities are not, there is still, I think, as Beth mentioned, the feeling about selling out and leaving academia and da-da-da-da. But do you also think there's, as well as that kind of culture that doesn't pervade every department, but does some, but also whether the problems that are being looked at, therefore, are more focused on the theoretical as opposed to the ones that might have more practical applications, and hence develop more skills that are more focused on kind of delivering products or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I had a depressing part of a conversation with somebody from an engineering department over the summer, who informed me for the first time that there is still, even in engineering departments, there is still a sense that something being of commercial use and being of practical use is somehow wrong.
No.
And I thought, well, I didn't expect to hear that in engineering.
No.
Now, I've picked that up in life sciences and other things like that. You're right, there's different metrics inside universities, and people are trained on those metrics really quite early, and it leads to this paper pressure, and it leads to all of that corrosion of people's joy in what it is that they're doing, and innovation and the rest of it. There is a problem inside universities. I think that's true. On the other hand, connected to this problem is I want to say youth, in that I just have a sense that people in their 20s up to their 30s have got much more of an appetite for risk, and much more of what I could take a chance on translating what it is that I do in, say, physics, for example, if I could find something that aligns with my values. What do I want to do? What do I want to change? And there's a lot more value-based thinking around, I think, amongst young people. And I think what we're waiting for is some sort of connection, some sort of transition almost in the internal university culture, but I don't think it's far away.
So Geraint, can I just respond to that? Because I think that, in preparation for the panel, I reached out to a lady called Kim Nielsen. So Kim was the founder of a data science consulting company called Pivigo. And in order to build her talent stream, she set up an initiative called S2DS, which the idea was to provide a short summer or short-based course to enable MSc graduates and PhDs in science to take a little taster and develop their skills such that they could take a commercial or industrial data science position, and also get a sense of whether that's the right thing for them as well. And I asked Kim, what was her experience, and she said, well, of the 700 students that had come through the S2DS course, she was struck by it was actually very simple. I think, and the reason I wanted to ask her, because it was a shortcut to asking the students themselves, and I think their views are probably more useful or apposite than whatever our analysis was. But she said, the first thing is the students coming through that program wanted a job, right? So that was their first concern. I think we all acknowledge actually how fragile the postdoc career path is for these individuals in academia. The second piece was they had a strong drive to find an opportunity that aligned with their values. So what was attractive to them were opportunities in sustainability, in clean tech, in life science. So we're right up there, above other areas. And then the third piece was, and they really wanted to feel they could make an impact on the business and do something really useful. And actually, there was a real kind of looking down on, say, going into a role where they were building an e-commerce site to sell shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, there are seeds out there of things that are beginning to work. Whether the life science industry is, prepared to step forward and embrace those kind of programs and sponsor to sort of, increase our exposure to that talent pool, I think is something that we all should be doing. And certainly Precision Life has sponsored that in the past.
Well, straight away, my response to that is that there are programs in universities now mandated often by the research councils that are pushing people out into internships where they're paying for them. They're trying to make this happen. There was a resistance at the start, but now there's a lot of appetite. And now people on PhD programs who don't have those opportunities are starting to knock on doors and ask why they don't have those opportunities, to go and see if they have, if they have any, to build some commercial awareness, some sort of sense of what the world will be like outside university. So it's happening. I mean, I'll tell you one of my big concerns, or not concerns here, or nuts that isn't getting cracked, is that about every 10 years, there's a new tech skills crisis of some sort. It rises again. We were short of people in these particular bioinformatics at one point, then it was mathematical modeling of another sort, and then it was, now it's data science. And universities are not, as far as I can tell, especially in life sciences, are not being told, they're not getting information about what is actually needed. There's a certain amount of trying to intuit it on the inside. Universities also have to make plans, make business cases about their investment of time and people. And they need to understand why the life sciences sector is going to need to suck in more people from physics, mathematics, computing, statistics, and make them useful in all of these sectors. I mean, there are PhD programs, for example, that have been supplying people into life sciences from those backgrounds, but they run at a trickle, because unless the research council is putting the money in, nobody wants to do it, because they don't have the confidence that there is a huge demand there. So I think there's one thing that's got to be built is a bridge, a much better flow of information about what is exactly is needed. So I think that's, because I think the willingness is on both sides. I'm sure the willingness is on both sides now, and I can't see the government's direction of travel being any different despite current difficulties. I think they're still going to want to go this way, and I think, but it's almost go back to Beth. It's almost like some sense of reassurance is needed that there are jobs on the other side, that there is excitement, that there is a life out there. And to get people out of their safe comfort zones.
I think this is it. And it's also, we get a lot of feedback from people that do go into industry in companies that are typically there at every sort of open day, every event, every careers event. It's IBM, it's the app developers, it's not the life sciences. And then these people will join these jobs, and then the feedback on us is that industry is not good, commercial is not good. That trickles down through the undergrads as well. And so I think there is that willingness. It's just a case of managing to bridge that gap somehow, but it's also the reassurance is we know companies in finance are going to pay us.
Actually,
I mean, there's a lot of risk. All the risk is on the young person's side. They've taken large loans, they put themselves through high skill bottlenecks, and certainly some sense of reassurance has got to be there. I mean, it is the big question, how do we get this excitement and this knowledge and this news into the universities, that there's a whole landscape out there hungry for agile, data savvy, technical people. I think that's coming. So Krzysztof, we haven't heard from you for a while.
So I think I have an idea for how this bridge can be made, which is essentially making funding for PhDs or even undergrads to become their own, you could say, group leaders. You could say, I mean, I think first thing that undergrads and graduate students should be told is 1 in 10 of you will maybe become the professor that you think you maybe wanted to be. You need to create your own job. I was once at a conference where there was a program that showed that the 16-year-olds who were told that created a lot of really, really creative things. I think universities need to tell young people, you're going to have to create your own job around what you want. And I think we need a reform of funding where early career people like Beth, probably, it sounds like she has a lot of ideas, but she wasn't given the opportunity to fund, you could say, building an idea further in a more secure way. You could have accelerators, which we have more and more in the UK, but I think this is where I think we could we need the tackling is the funding for very early career researchers to be able to continue without, you could say, maybe the postdoc or some kind of supervised postdoc. I mean, I think this is where the solutions are, the funding more younger people sooner to become the independents.
So my worry there would be that a really quite savvy academic sector would take advantage of that to just create new funding streams to keep things as they are. So rather, they just rebadge postdocs in this or PhD students in this slightly different way. And and I think university technology transfer offices would look at that as a new income stream as well, and meet all of their different targets. I mean, so my question is going to be, if more, where would the money come from? I mean, one thing that everybody's out for money at the moment. There's less of it around than there might have been. It's always going to have to flow with the hot ideas. I mean, is there any sense about whether Krzysztof, from Jackie and Rowan, is there any sense of how Krzysztof's interest might be met, or his ideas, or are we about where we as good as we can be?
Well, I think this is a very apposite time to actually explore this, because funnily enough, I was talking to people from UKRI the other day, and they are piloting some schemes. There's a secondment scheme for academics to go and work in industry, which will backfill the salary. Their Wellcome Trust are saying they're going to focus much more on early career researchers. So I think there is a appetite to do something about this, and it's actually in part for industry to articulate more clearly what it actually needs, going back to what Rowan was saying earlier, and also being willing to engage with people or institutions that they might not have engaged with previously. It's especially hard for SMEs because obviously they have more limited resources, but I think that as companies become more digitally savvy in the healthcare space, I'm thinking specifically here about pharma companies, then they will be able to articulate more what they want in a better way. But because you don't know what you don't know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I do think it is actually time to push in this direction.
Okay, so Rowan, have you any thoughts on how to operationalize that?
So I'm gonna kind of I don't want to get too down into the weeds about what universities do and don't do. I'm going to reflect that Manchester hasn't done a great job of supporting Beth, because the risk isn't all on that, or the risk is actually kind of on the universities and the employers. Beth, you can go and work in any industry, and if you don't like it, you've got the skills to move, and you are going to be paid incredibly well, and the world is your oyster in terms of where you use your talent and the impact you will have, and ring me, I'll help you. so you're solved.
Oh, I appreciate this. Unfortunately, I've taken a postdoc position after my PhD, actually, where they're still not going to pay me
in
very
2
much.
years. Ring me.
Fine, cool. Thank you.
But I think it's not just about recruitment; it's about retention, right? So that's the other piece of this is, these individuals are highly talented, and it's not just about industry saying there's a mismatch in supply and demand. It's also, once you capture this very special talent, how you develop it, nurture it, and retain it, and you provide the kind of culture that these individuals are seeking. And I'm kind of reflecting on yesterday's session at the end of Genesis. There was the most fantastic discussion about, what would move this industry on to 2040, and a wonderfully vibrant conversation around diversity and inclusion, particularly with the two members of the panel who are of colour. And I also see that there's a talent pool that isn't coming through universities. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit and say, if we're going to address this skills shortage that we have, any cat who's capable of running a keyboard obviously has house room here. But more than that, I think there is a lot of talent perhaps in parts of our society who just are not getting a fair crack of the whip and access to university. There is phenomenal talent coming out of the armed forces. Armed forces, unfortunately, it's not just life science that is becoming more digital, so is war. And there's some really strong DevOps people, cryptographic people who are in the military, who I'm really up for bringing into life sciences, where I think they have a fantastic role to play. So I think that's the other thing, is we've got to ask ourselves what we want our industry to look like, and also put incentives into university to look more widely into your talent pool. There are some really good KTP programs being run in the comp sci departments of universities. Sunderland is a phenomenal university for computer science. I think the life sciences industry probably don't necessarily see those universities on their sort of natural life science map of the UK.
Yeah.
So we as an industry have to go much broader to find these talents and bring into our industry a really vibrant set of individuals to meet these challenges.
Yeah.
So,
Krzysztof,
yes, so actually we've got a really interesting comment. So it's two comments I want to make. So Dave Graham wrote that Nigel Pitchford, CEO of IESO Digital Health, said that in the past they've had issue recruiting new grads as they often have an altruistic outlook and choosing life sciences, healthcare over gaming, Microsoft. So I think we've got these very young people who are willing to work for like startups like Braincures, whatever. 5 years on in their career, they prefer to try Microsoft, Google, whatnot. And then 5 years after, they might realize, well, that's not any longer for me. I do my own startups. That's why we have a lot of AI startups, 10 per month forming. But I think in the UK, you may have heard about the ARPA, right? Where we're trying to do the DARPA of the US. That I think could be very, where we might be able to bridge the gap and find these cryptographers and whatnot, pull them into solving data crunching solutions. And one of the things is that for data, we need to open more high quality data for these cryptographers. It's not just that we get them, but that they work on really good data. But that's a whole other conversation.
No, I think this is an absolutely critical point. I mean, we're talking about diversity in every different dimension we can think of. The ones that are embedded in employment law are obvious, but also the sources of knowledge, the types of knowledge, the differences of experience, all of these different things that are going to create surprises. I will know that things are becoming a success in universities when I can't encourage PhDs to even stay in a university. I will know that I've been doing my job right, because they've got so many other prospects and are so aware of all of the other things that they could do that it'd be very difficult to make them stick. I think that's got to be critical. But go ahead, Krzysztof.
And I guess one more point is that we should be paying our women equal, right? I mean, we've known 60 women sue Google for not paying them equal price for equal skills. And this is something quite big, the equal pay.
Yeah, any sort of entrenched difference like that is going to be poisonous. It's going to be poisonous.
It's also a motivator, I think, for women to do more startups. And so I think things like COVID, right? We thought it was all bad, but I think it accelerated telemedicine. All of a sudden, we're seeing doctors right on the phone.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think we boiled down to so far communications and the lack of difficulties in transfer of information and awareness of what's of interest. Nailed it down to diversity of talent and the fact we're probably taking a very strangulated supply of people because we'd probably be quite conventional about what we think our hallmarks of quality are. It sounds like there's a big challenge. I mean, I was just going to say that probably one of the most useful groups. I mean, if I could do anything in the university, I'd create some sort of advisory board. But what I'd want on it is the translators, the people who we heard about earlier, and especially first generation ones who made the move. They're the best ambassadors to play back into universities, I suspect, and help the universities understand both the management, but also the students at all levels about what it is that's out there. But I don't quite understand how to do that. But I sense the willingness is there. And that's just the university sector. That's just universities. That's without thinking about all the other places where we could get.
So Jackie, do you with any of the sort of recent and younger stage of career employees in some of the organizations you're involved with, do you encourage them to sort of go back to their alma mater and engage with the careers organization and sort of stand up and sort of describe their experience of going into industry? Because I think if we kind of build on Krzysztof's point, there's a lot being said about women becoming CEOs of companies. They need to see kind of their other women being CEOs to recognize they can do it. I think this is the same example. Having student early careers individuals who are having positive experience of working in industry, being invited back by their careers organizations in their universities to talk about, hello, my name's Rowan Gardner. I'm going to take on Beth's role. I've been involved with astrophysics research, and I've made the move into BenevolentAI. It'd be fantastic to work for Jackie. And these are my experiences of, oh blimey, biology, it's completely mad, but we're having a blast. Because I think those tales are important, to give the students a sense of actually what this means for me. It's that classic kind of, these are big decisions that loom large in our younger people's minds, and they want to hear not from wizened old crones like me, but by people they recognize as being like them.
Yeah, no, I mean,
communication.
I don't think we actively go and say, go back to your alma mater and talk to them, but we have people who have, if they've been asked, and we certainly go out and do a lot of talks to university groups. I do, but as you say, I'm a wizened old what's it, so they probably won't. but Alex, I think, from Benevolent is talking here, or has talked here at this conference. I think I completely agree with you. If we can do more of that and go out, one of the things we have been talking about is how can we engage more with the community schools that are around where we are based in London, to think about kind of inspiring, the communities around their Asian girls, Afro-Caribbean guys who may not want to really sort of think about how in the future that they could really could be inspired to go down this route. And one thing about Benevolent is we are pretty heterogeneous and diverse as an organisation, so we've got lots of people we can call on to talk about. And one of the other things we are talking a lot about is diversity in data as well, because I think that's really important.
Yes, I just want to turn to Beth, but I just want to preempt her by saying that pretty much all the data shows that people will believe people who the stories of people who are closer to them in age more readily than they will believe any other audience. Do you think if there were ambassadors from this sector, people who'd made the transition, made the step, if they were visible inside your university, that you would feel more able to access this?
I was thinking this while Rowan was talking. Actually, I'm not going to call anyone a wizened old Watson, but I'm going to say that yes, it really helps to have someone that's much closer to where you are. Also is familiar with the current climate feeling of job pressure, housing pressure, all of these different things. It really helps to have someone that is much easier to relate to. We even do it with undergrads, actually. We assign PhD students as course tutors, not the staff, simply for this reason. So I really think, and it's also, where the excitement's there, that's something that really lacks.
Okay.
So it sounds like we should get the mentors from some of these companies to sort of be available for students to reach out to. And that's one of the solutions, right? The collaborations between academia and pharma or whatever.
Well, straight away, what I'm seeing in my mind's eye is a almost like a pipeline or a cascade here, where the sector begins to tell the universities and the students in it, but also by implication the staff, what is really wanted, and the best ambassadors are the younger people, or maybe different people, different strata. The engagement starts happening, and then the universities, well, they've had a kick in the pants over the last few years last few months about diversity and how they've got to transform their intakes at all sorts of different levels. They're going to cascade these stories down into schools. Now, it seems to me that could be a natural linkage there that says they can reach all the way back to schools, that they will almost certainly send undergraduates or early PhD students into schools to tell the story about what the future looks like in tech industries, for example. And if they're getting their story from the life sciences innovation sector as well, suddenly it starts to look like one big joined up activity. So it sounds also opportunity to be thinking about this now as well, because it will naturally, if you engage with the university, if industry engages with university, it will naturally cascade out somewhere else as well. Anyway, just my feeling. I mean, it might be a bit of a pipe dream, but so I'm anxious. I'm looking at the clock here to see that we only have about 8 minutes left, and I'm sure that we may get a nudge at some point to wrap up. But I wondered if anybody had anything that they'd like to summarise from what we've heard. If anything's popped up as a key message here that you maybe didn't expect to hear, or have you found as a suspicion of your own confirmed by other opinions. Anybody?
Well, I guess I will say more of a comment. So I myself went to pharma just after the PhD, and I think we need to be mindful that the young people need to just break from the cycle of saying you need to do a postdoc, you need to do this or that. You define their limit. So Beth, you need to maybe rethink if you want to do that postdoc, and maybe not try to get Rowan and Jackie earlier. That's time is, you can't get back time. And I think here that's one of the, I think, messages here is the sky is the limit. You have to be curious. And I think the people with that drive, you get that young with the altruistic, you could say, drive. And then it turns into, you could say, survival, where you need the finance. And that's why if you don't succeed to accelerate into your own startup, you then go into maybe working for a company. I think the government needs to find spots to support people who want to build new companies a bit more than they do today, where you put in sweat equity and then you have 30% that's missing, and it's difficult to bridge that.
Okay.
So Krzysztof, I think the government puts a lot of support into nurturing new companies, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there is an opportunity, I think, to increase the dialogue between universities And I don't know what the current state of play is with careers in support of our MSCs and PhD level, but I think there's a role for industry to play, particularly giving our opportunities for our younger members of staff to represent these opportunities. I also think that helping some of the prospective talent pool recognize why, what are the strengths and benefits of maybe spending the first few years in big industry and understanding some of the problems that you might then want to go and solve, or why you might want to come into a startup. And if you're going to come into a startup, what are the benefit packages that you should be expecting? I went very early into a startup. It was successful. I had share options. I'd paid off my mortgage by 36 because of that. And I think that might be something that's quite attractive, Beth, for you to consider. So if you are going to a startup, it's been a philosophy in all the companies that I've been involved is everybody gets options, because if we create wealth, then everyone who's participating in the creation of wealth should get a share of it. Those kind of benefits, it's different levels of risk and reward in different settings, and perhaps more than skills, Geraint, maybe that capability to recognize opportunities is what's missing.
Yeah, I mean, you've absolutely convinced me there. I mean that it's snapped in, snapped into like a missing piece of my jigsaw. It's this knowledge of the landscape and the differences between the different sizes of industry, different focuses they have, your risk, your reward, the fact that maybe you can move, the highly skilled people can move between those. That is in a large sense often completely absent. And I think that's maybe some of the reassurance that's missing for Beth, and was probably missing for Krzysztof at an earlier stage, that there's a lot of difference out there. Unless you've got it in your family, and unless then you may reach a highly skilled, highly educated point at 21, 24, something like that, but you have no commercial awareness at all. You have no idea about what the employment landscape looks like, other than just the narrow track through universities, which you see in front of you. Jackie, did you have a comment on to close this, to generalize and close this up?
I think there's been some good ideas, and I think we are all in violent agreement about what some of the issues are. What I'd like to do is maybe to think about, one nucleus could think about how they could perhaps have some event at the next meeting that could explore the concept of this kind of role models and how to get those stories out into universities and students.
Okay, well, in that case, with just minute and a half probably, Beth, I wondered if you would like to say something, being right at the sweet spot of all of this discussion.
I mean, this has been something that's been very good for me to watch. I am in quite a unique situation where I happen to know about this sector in the first place. But this is the start of you doing the right thing. Having me here, this is going to feed back absolutely to my university. I've had already people asking if they can join the sessions, if they could listen in. There is the interest there. Like I said, you're doing the right thing in starting by engaging one of us, and that will spread. The more of us you can find, even one at a time, continue doing it. There is interest. You just need to find a way to get to us.
And I think that Jackie has laid down the challenge to one nucleus, not just a challenge, but an opportunity here, I suspect.
Monthly mentor or business angel clubs.
I'm sure there's something that can be done. Well, in that case, I see that our guardian angel has dropped back into the conversation. So are we done, do you think?
I think so. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and Jackie for the feedback. We'll definitely take it on board. Yeah, it was such an interesting discussion, so thank you. And I would encourage anybody, if you've got any questions, to get in touch with any of the panel members via the app, and make sure you keep an eye out for any of the other innovation workshops coming up. So thank you.
Well,
Okay, bye. Bye.
Fantastic. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.